Did we move forward to the why?
Yes, perfect. Excellent.
Okay.
So this morning we're going to jump into community asset mappings, a little bit of a different launch than we've maybe you've experienced in the past couple of years. If you've been to PBL Institute, if you're new to PBL Institute, you have no clue. So this is perfect. So with this virtual edition, we're trying to find ways to connect you into the work early and often as we start the morning. Also, we listened to a lot of feedback from last year and the last couple of years really, as to the fact that people wanted to get into project development. They wanted the launch to really connect to what they were doing. And so we believe that this activity this morning and what you're going to do with individually and as a team is going to really benefit moving forward with your project. So community asset mapping focuses on the positive aspects of the community, really thinking about what we do have as opposed to what we do not have. So often when people start to plan things, they're looking for problems and needs. Well, in this case, we're going to be looking for what are our assets? What are the positive things we already have access to? We all know that student engagement and motivation increases when a project is, number one, authentic. Number two, you can go back to the why still. Number two, relevant and goes beyond the classroom. And also it might be connecting with a client or definitely an audience in the end. So the purpose of this launch is to document your existing PBL assets and uncover potential new PBL assets you may have not been aware of that support authenticity, active learning, or active exploration and adult connections. Going through the process of the community asset mapping, this morning unlock some potential project ideas. It could reveal maybe a potential client or a partnership that you have been unaware of, maybe a venue or a group to share and showcase the learning, and then also opportunities for adult connections through feedback cycles. One thing that we've really noticed with distance learning is that people might be more available online and can interact with your students in a different way than just being there and being present in your class. We can get them and hook them virtually. Let's jump into the what. So what are we going to be doing? The process is going to take approximately an hour and 45 minutes. In part one, we're going to let Max and Cydia from Youth Advocacy lead you through some identity work and really trying to look at yourself as an asset. We're going to be moving into breakout rooms toward the end of the first part, where you're going to share some of your thoughts and ideas you have as you were thinking through your own self as an asset and doing that identity work. And then in part two, we're going to move into breakout rooms with your team. Some teams are very large, so we might have broken you up into two teams, but we'll have the same school teams, and you're going to go through the process of documenting the assets on your team, number one, but also in your school community, local community, and beyond. And I'm gonna now turn this thing over to Max and Cydia. They're going to introduce themselves. But thank you, Max and Cydia, for collaborating with us and preparing for this community asset mapping activity and launch this morning. I'll let Max and Cydia take over from here.
Thanks, Ruben. All right. We're super excited to be engaging in this collaboration with y'all and to be helping out guide this identity work with everyone. But as culturally responsive practitioners, we need to talk a little bit about ourselves first, acknowledge our identities, and make sure we feel like we're not just anonymous people presenting to you, but like we're people that are genuinely trying to work and collaborate with you. So for myself, we both work in advocacy, but for myself, I specifically am a resource teacher for culturally responsive pedagogy. I'm sure I've worked with some of you here. I see a few familiar faces. But the last 5 years before this year, as my first year in San Diego Unified District, I was working at High Tech High Chula Vista for 5 years teaching PBL project-based learning with a focus on culturally responsiveness and equity. And so I not only have like a background in culturally responsive pedagogy, I also have a pretty substantial background in projects and project-based learning as well. And a little bit about me, just enough to get a taste, but nothing more. I'm originally from New Hampshire, moved around a little bit, slowly making my way from the East Coast to West. And I'm white, I'm male, I'm middle class, I'm cisgender, and I'm heterosexual. And those things are important to acknowledge because they help explain a big piece of my identity. Whether I necessarily see it as at the forefront or not, it is. And so it's important to acknowledge in doing this work. And we're going to ask you this question in a moment, so we're both going to answer it for you. But I got into education because I was really into like fantasy and sci-fi as a kid. And I was obsessed with this idea that the world would need saving one day. And so this is when I was really young. And as I grew older and as I matured and I got to know more about the world, I realized there wasn't necessarily this clearly stark good versus evil, but there was a lot of good that needed to be done, and there was a lot of evil or bad in society that needed to be fought. And I saw my place in that being education. And so it's a bit cheesy, but it speaks to also who I am deep down, which is cheesy. So that's why I got an education, and I'm definitely going to stay in it for the long run. So Cedia, do you want to introduce yourself?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Cedia Brewer. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am also with youth advocacy. I am a resource teacher as well. My focus has been on student advocacy, or student agency and student voice. Just so you all know, I have been in the district for about 25 years now. I grew up in San Diego, City Heights, Logan Heights, Spring Valley. And my background is special education, which then I moved into as a dean of students at Hoover High School for many years. From there, I have been able to experience the family and community engagement department, and now youth advocacy. Big part of my identity is also that I'm a mom. I'm a mom of 2 kids. Both of them are in our district, a 13-year-old, which is loads of fun, and a 10-year-old. All you middle school teachers out there, thank you. Thank you for all you. And I got into education because I come from a family of educators. I promised myself I was not going to become a teacher also, like all of them. And then I got a job as a teacher's aide right out of high school. And then I was really able to experience firsthand the different relationships with students make, and how just much they bloomed and blossomed, and just how incredible they are by building those really authentic relationships. And from there, I was hooked. And so I've been in it since. So thank you all for having us here. We really appreciate it. And we're going to go ahead and get started. So we asked you these questions in the beginning. So we're going to ask you to throw some of your answers in the chat. Just one, either number 1 or number 2, or both, if you feel compelled. But number 1, why did you get into education? And number 2, why do you engage in PBL? Also think about number 3, but we'll be talking about that one a little bit later. So for now, you can just share at least one of these in the chat with us, please.
And we're going to give you some time to put those in, maybe a minute or 2. But we're going to come back to answers later on. Okay, awesome. Already got some responses coming in. Want to make a difference in student lives. Education equals power, opportunity, and social change. I couldn't agree more. Because you love history, want to be a teacher in 7th grade. PBL is the most authentic teaching and learning. Yes, it is. to teach history to others.
Got another family of educators in there.
Yeah. I got into education because I feel all the world's problems can be solved through it. Yes, I thoroughly agree. We got a veteran PBL educator in there. Oh, they're coming fast.
That light bulb. I think that light bulb is what hooked me when I was young and started working with kids. See that light bulb go on.
Yeah. Love biology. Bring it alive for the youth. Students definitely need that. Got real and deeper learning through PBL. Engage in PBL because it allows my students to learn in an authentic way while becoming strong and empathetic communicators, for sure. Some of those like soft and hard skills that are developed through PBL are so beneficial.
A lot of our identities are connected.
Nice. I saw as a bilingual immigrant, wanted to help and aid in immigrant students. Awesome. Another one about being bilingual, how beneficial that is. Impactful Spanish teacher. It's awesome. All right, these are all great responses. And I'm going to stop reading them out for now, but continue to look through them if you want in the chat. So we wanted to start, really on a high note and in doing something that connects us all together, which is the great why. Why are we doing this? Why are we here today? Why do you care to do PBL? Why do you care to be an educator? And hopefully this is all going to help us tap into the identity work that we're going to do through just a really short identity mapping activity that some of you that are more experienced in PBL teaching may have done before. So
all of this is really taking us into, what your answers here are into culture and identity. And we're talking about culturally responsive teaching. But to get into that, we really need to know about identity, the identity of our students and our own identity. So here's just a couple of definitions here for us. Culture, which is really just the shared frame of reference for interacting with one another and for interpreting the world in which we live. And while identity within that is who we are, the way we think about ourselves, and the way that we're viewed by the world. So we're going to be going into an activity where we're going to be talking about this a little bit more. But as we can see, culture is essential to our identity. And being a culturally responsive teacher will always be tapping into the identity of ourselves and our students. As we engage in this work, we're promoting an awareness of ourselves and the similarities and differences with our students. Should always be looking at their identity, thinking about theirs, thinking about ours, and finding out where we're connecting and where we're different. And that's good and that's great, right? And we're learning from each other. And what we're really hoping is that this work that we're doing today, and as we continue to do it, is really guiding our students, that we can guide them through the same process and this allows them to see themselves in their classroom, in their curriculum, which will increase their ownership and engagement, just like we're hoping with you all today.
And just to kind of cement this idea of culture and identity being interwoven and why we should be tapping into that, we all know the more that students are engaged, the more that they want to learn, the more that they are going to try their hardest, the more they're going to go above and beyond to do the work and for you as the teacher. And the same is true as teachers. The more we are invested, the more we are engaged, the more we're going to do what is necessary to do the best for ourselves and for our students. Because really this is a team that we're creating in our classrooms, just like with your educators, your fellow educators you're creating. a team. And the chiefest way we can get students engaged, what we've learned, is by speaking to their culture. You know, there's mountains of data, there's mountains of research that shows how impactful it is that a student feels like their identity and their culture is welcome and spoken to in the classroom, not just one single dominant culture as we traditionally have, but a diverse array of cultures and identities. And so we want to speak to that. And we don't just want to do it for our students, we want to do it for ourselves. So today we're just kind of diving into that for ourselves first so that you can do it later with your students.
Yeah.
And we're really just putting a baby toe into what it means, into the water of what it means to be culturally responsive today. And I'm sure a lot of you here are very familiar with this. So we're just, in the interest of being clear about that, we wanted to just share the definition that we work off of and that I work off of in my trainings with school sites and other educators. Because while we're not taking a deep dive, it is important to acknowledge, again, as I was just speaking, like, why are we doing this? So this is from Gloria Ladson Billings, looked at as like she's one of the foremost thinkers in coining what culturally responsive practices are. It's a pedagogy or philosophy of teaching that recognizes the importance of including students' cultural references in all aspects of learning, including, celebrating, putting at the forefront, making it the heart of the curriculum, whatever level you're at. That is the culturally responsive work. It's also a pedagogy that acknowledges, responds to, and celebrates fundamental cultures in order to offer equitable access to education for students from all backgrounds. And that equity piece is huge, because what we've seen in the past is everyone is like, I'm going to treat everyone the same and expect the same results. I want everyone to get here, so I'm going to treat everyone the same. That's equal. But what we know is that everyone comes in at a different level. And what we need to be striving for is equity, which is understanding that everyone comes in a different level and giving them different tools and giving them different ways to get at the end goal that we want with the learning and the content and the skills. And ultimately, this is going to be a pedagogy that will aid in fighting against bias and inequity, the structural bias that we see in our society today, the structural racism that we see perpetuated through our society and through our education system. So the more that we become culturally responsive practitioners, the more we're doing that work to help our society become better. So that's our piece about culturally responsive teaching. And we're going to move from there back into the identity piece, because again, our identity and our culture is inexorably intertwined. We kind of put it on this infinity spectrum where they're constantly feeding back into each other. And so we're going to start with you here. We're going to examine your identity, and this is where you're going to start doing some work. And we're going to stop talking, because I'm sure you're going to have a lot of talking over the next couple of days on Zoom. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to examine our identity. Can you go back to the identity slide, Cedia?
Yeah, of course, my computer's like starting to do the whole lagging bit right now. So trying to take it back.
Okay, well, what we're going to do is we're just going to take a deep dive into our identity, and we're also going to use, I'm going to show my identity map that I created as a model throughout, so that it's kind of obvious what you're going to do here. And I think we're ultimately trying to get at what you're passionate about and who you are as a person, so that we can tap into that for your project ideas, and so that your teams can be just super strong together, because teams are only as strong as how well they know each other. Next slide, and take it away, Cedia.
Okay, and of course, we know that education is changing drastically right now. And so I saw somebody post here in the chat that this work is so important right now. And yes, we believe that this work has been important, but it's even more important. We're finding it right now. So as education is changing, how can we take this identity work to the next level as we're moving forward? So what we're going to ask you to do is, on your piece of paper, in the center of your paper, if you can draw a circle, and write your name in it, because today we're going to be examining our identity and help us understand what it is and what we're passionate about, and how does that really drive our work with true authenticity and meaning. Let's see if my computer moves forward. Yes. Okay, so we're just going to begin the basics of looking at our identity. So around that circle, it says that's you. I'm going to ask that you put some of your identities around it. Here are some ideas for you. You don't have to use these ones, but here are some that we have: languages, sexuality, education, your education level, immigration status, where were you born, geography, where do you live, where did you grow up, class, your gender, race. And with that in mind, we have an example here for you for Max. Max did his. Max, did you want to add anything to this slide right here?
Yeah, I just think that regardless of whether you feel these pieces are a big part of your identity, that's not necessarily the point at this part. So whether you feel like your sexuality or your race or your gender or your class is a big part of your identity, this is just a starting point. So we want you to put down these things. Whether you end up tapping into these or not, it's totally up to you.
Okay.
And so this is my example. And I think at this point, it would be helpful to share that, I did something like this most of the years that I worked at High Tech High Chula Vista as a PBL educator. And this is where I got all my project ideas, was starting at my identity. Because the more I care about something, the more I'm going to project that, and my students are going to care about it. So for me, I shared some of these pieces already. I'm white, very white, male. I grew up middle class, but as I was growing up, my parents became more middle upper class. Was born in New Hampshire, moved to Colorado for undergraduate, went to Oregon for graduate school at the U of O, and I undergrad at DU, Denver University, and then I moved to San Diego and got a job at High Tech High Chula Vista. Immigration, my dad's family has been here for about 4 generations. My mom's family has been here for much longer. Very European, very Protestant background. My education level, I have masters. My parents have degrees, but their highest level is undergraduate. I'm heterosexual, and I'm an English speaker, native, but I'm also a non-fluent Spanish speaker. I took Spanish. I've been to Mexico. I've been to Spain multiple times. So those are my examples. We're going to give you like maybe 1 more minute to continue filling out. And if you want to add more, that's up to you. We just wanted to start from something basic.
Now, as we have those, we're going to move out and add to that. So now we want you all to think about some of these, like your hobbies. What are some areas that you are generally participating in with, like in personal growth and development? Do you participate in any clubs or organizations? What's your family structure like? How about political affiliation? That's a big one right now. And also think about your strengths that you are aware of, or that that you know about, and that are very much like connected to who you are and your identity. Your generation and age, I like to think that this one doesn't connect to my identity quite so much, but it does. How old we are, and then of course like our personality type. So we're going to give you a second to go ahead and fill those out, and we'll show you Max's as well, so you can see what he did for this one. Here we go.
So before I read mine out, can I just get a general like thumbs up if everyone's with us, or a thumbs down if we're moving too fast and you want us to pause for a second? Middle obviously is in between. We'll just scan.
looking good.
Cool. Rad. Okay, we're all used to this Zoom format by now. So what I put down for my details, I put like, I love the outdoors, hiking and climbing, big passions of mine. I am not great all the time at working on details. Like that's a pretty big area of growth for me. Like I'm really great at big picture thinking, and rapid fire big picture thinking, brainstorming, and critical thinking. But sometimes I struggle in the details and like really, even just remembering the details that I've already hashed out. But even getting to that place. So I generally need to work with people who are good at detail oriented stuff. I am a member of the Alpine Club. I'm a contributing member to KPBS. I'm an SDEA member. Just as an example of a few organizations I'm a part of. My family, nuclear. I have one older sister. Politically, I'm liberal. I'm a risk taker and a problem solver. I definitely like taking big risks. I like taking chances. I like experimenting. I think that's one of the things that really attracted me to PBL to begin with. So those are strengths that I have. I'm really quick to push people to go further than they think they can go, including myself. And for generation, I'm on the tail end of being a millennial. Don't judge me. I'm 34. I'll be 35 in a few months. But that's my generation I belong to. And again, I don't feel like that's a big part of my identity, but it really is. It makes a huge difference when talking to people that are a lot younger or older than me. And our students are generally much younger than us. So that's important to take into context. And I'm very outgoing and I'm an extrovert. Although I do need my alone time to recharge. I love being around people, which has made this whole situation very tough for me. Like I really get a lot from being face to face with people.
So as we continue this, you start working with your team, you're really going to see how these identity pieces contribute to and are assets to your team. Like, for example, Max's age, he's a millennial, I'm an Xer. So we tend to like think about things a little bit differently, whether or not we realize that we do or not. Well, the working on details piece. So each one, like he's very big picture. Sometimes I'm a little bit more like, what are the little steps? So this like allows us to be able to work better as a team and get to know each other and find each other's assets. So you'll be working on that as you move forward. So now we're going to take this, with that in mind, we're going to take this to the next level. So considering your identities and what are you passionate about? Like what truly like moves you? And what identities are those passions connected to? So as you fill this out, you can make arrows to connect to some of those identities. So like we have Max's here. He put in some of his passions, and so we can see where and how that they can connect.
Yeah, so I put social justice, wealth inequality, street art, environment, environmentalism, political science. That was my undergraduate degree in food. That was my job before I became an educator. And I put these because they don't seem necessarily super explicitly connected to my previous identities. But for example, my experience growing up middle class, that has a whole story behind it. I grew up in a very small town on a lake that was very low income. And the only people that could actually afford to live on the lake in New Hampshire were all people from out of town that were very upper class. The property was like at minimum, $1 million for just like a half an acre shack. And so at a young age, I had this very clear idea of what class was. And it really seemed like I was a part of, and most of my peers were part of the service class, serving the upper class. And so it gave me a lot of ideas. And eventually that's a big part of what I teach to. And when I first started formulating my project ideas, I realized that I needed to tap into that because that was something that I was really passionate about. So I spoke to ideas of social justice in this graffiti street art project I did. called Culture Jamming, which embodied a bunch of big social justice ideas, including wealth inequality, and racism and LGBTQIA plus rights. But the students got to do it through street art, which was something also that I was passionate about, through creating graffiti stencils and kind of little memes on their computers. And it was all based on this book that I read when I was an undergraduate called Culture Jamming by Cal Lassen. He's the guy who started the Occupy Wall Street. Well, he's looked at as one of the people who started the Occupy Wall Street movement.
Okay. So now we're going to add on to what we have here. If my bubbles go forward, I might have clicked it too many times. I did. Don't do that one yet. So the next one, I want you all to think about now, what communities are you a part of? And it doesn't necessarily have to be I'm sorry?
You got to go back one more.
Oh. Thanks.
There you go.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, so don't think about communities yet. We'll get there. So now I want you to thinking about those things that you're passionate about, right? What strengths and skills and assets have you built and acquired with those passions? And how are they connected? You know, as we become passionate and interested in things, we become experts in those fields generally, and we get new skills and we acquire new learning. So thinking about those things that you're really, really passionate about, what have you learned? And what does that bring to what you do? So Max, here.
Yeah, and so as I mentioned in the last slide, your identity is going to inform what you care about and what your passions are. And what your passions are and your identity is going to inform what strengths, skills, and assets you bring to the table as a human being, but in particular, in this context, as an educator and as a fellow team member for project-based learning development. So when you meet with your team and you're brainstorming, you can say, like, these are the skills that I think I have, and these are the identities or passions they're tapped into. So for me, I'm really great at networking. I'm very class conscious. I have an artistic mind, although I am garbage at drawing. I'm garbage at drawing, I'm garbage at painting. But I have a very artistic mind. Like, I think very creatively. And that's another reason why I did this graffiti street art project, because that was something that I could conceptualize and I could think artistically about. And I have a lot of creative confidence. I have a lot of confidence in my creativity, because I understand that my creativity doesn't have anything to do with necessarily drawing or painting. It has much more to do with thinking. And also I'm a very big critical thinker, which connected to another project that I did that was all about philosophy and the meaning of life. I realized that was one of the biggest things that I spent all of my time thinking about. And so I could easily connect that into, the 12th grade curriculum that I was teaching, and do a whole project around the meaning of life and have students create things that conceptualized what they saw as the meaning of life. Yeah. And I guess pause again, do a thumbs up.
How are you doing?
A thumbs down if you need another minute or 30 seconds to think this one through, because it's harder here.
Yeah, thinking about the strengths can get a little bit more difficult.
So give us
How we doing?
If you're with us and we can keep going, or thumbs down if you need more time.
I'm just going to do like another minute or so here.
Yeah.
See, I see a couple thumbs down.
Max, I'm sitting one question in the chat about if you could clarify I think
you're totally breaking up. We can't hear you.
Oh,
yeah.
Sorry. Do you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. In the chat, there's one person said, teams are only as strong as well as they know each other. That's something Max said. I think Max just alluded to it, but could you clarify that just a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. I think that when we jump into working with people, we either naturally kind of start to get to know each other along the way through just working together, or we force ourselves to, because if I know how I work and how, for example, Cedia is my team, my more immediate team, how Cedia works, we can do the best work possible together because we can shortcut delegating tasks. As I said, I know I'm a big thinker. I know Cedia is a little bit more detail oriented. We might divvy up tasks in a situation like this because we know that about each other. But if we didn't take the time to do that, we wouldn't know that. Another example is, I shared that I'm really into street art. If Cedia has a project idea that has something to do with, we need an art component, she knows she can tap into that, or I know I should bring that to the table because we know this background about each other. And I think we also care more about one another when we know each other better. And I think that's good because that means we're invested in each other. That means we'll do more work. That means we'll have more compassion when there's a miscommunication. That means that we assume better interest when we're communicating or when we're acting with one another than if we didn't know each other. The more anonymous we are, the less we have to care about each other.
And this really goes the same for our students, right? Our relationships with our students and how we connect with them and how we know about them and their culture and their identity, and the same with them knowing about us and then with each other. And, as they're working together within these teams, like, are they learning about each other? Are they able to even begin to express their own identities? I mean, how difficult is that for us right now? So can we imagine, for our young people? So the sooner that we really start to dive into this, the sooner that we can be able to work with each other as teams. Okay, I'm going to move us forward if it lets me. Here we go. This is the right one, right? Okay, now we're going to look at our communities. So not just our physical communities, but maybe also our physical communities, but what communities are you part of because of those identities, your passions, and or your strengths? So yeah, Max, go ahead and talk about yours. I keep wanting to give examples, and then I realize your examples are right
there. That's why we did it this way, because it is intuitive. For me, again, if we look at this graffiti street art project I did called Culture Jamming for 3 years with my students, I knew I had a network of artistic people that I could tap into in Chula Vista, which is where I was teaching, to make this happen. Like, I needed experts in the classroom. And so I had this artistic community, this community of artists that I could tap into to do that. I knew some on a personal level, and then some of them knew other people. Like, I didn't know anybody who did graffiti street art, but I knew somebody who did. And so I tapped into that resource in order to get some advice, some development from them, and then also to have them come into the classroom and talk a little bit about their experience doing street art. If you're really passionate about biology, you probably know some people that are biologists or some professionals that you can maybe don't know very well, but you could reach out to in order to come in and be an expert or to help you come up with an idea that would embed some really awesome biology content in your classroom. Same with history. You might know a lot of people that are also either academics in history or are super passionate about them. And so you want to put those people down. For me, I had a lot of also grad school friends that were really passionate about social justice and could help me connect with various nonprofits for my students to investigate as part of the projects as well. And then some of my other affiliations that don't necessarily have as much to do with that project belong to the local Democratic Party, because of my experience cooking for years and being a sous chef through college, and after, I know a lot about the food culture and cooks and chefs. And then I have a whole network of climbers should I want to tap into that for whatever reason, maybe through a geology project, I don't know. And so,
JK, I
one
was
thing,
muted.
can I jump in real quick? One thing that
Yeah.
Max and City also talked about was virtual communities too. So in thinking about your
Oh, yeah.
communities, they don't have to be face to face. They could be, maybe you're connected to various groups, you know, social media or in some virtual format.
And I think we were talking about like how important that has become as of recently. And so thinking about all of those that we may be connected to, and same with our students. I mean, there's like the Instagram community, the Twitter community, the TikTok community. So all of those communities, they're contributing as well to our students and to ourselves as well. So I think Max kind of brought us into, as he was talking about his communities, he was also talking about this idea of potential projects. So we're going to give you a couple, like a minute, because we want this to be kind of like a fast jot down to try to list of like 5 to 10 potential project experiences that can be connected to your strengths, passions, and identity. So look at what you have here, everything that you've written down, and what are like, and just like super quick, it doesn't have to be fleshed out, just some ideas of like, ooh, I would love to do a project about this, that, or the other. And Max, I'll let you do your examples.
Yeah, you know, and I think this part is supposed to be rapid fire because it lets us let our guard down, and be like, it doesn't have to be perfect, and it doesn't have to be a fully fleshed out idea. So I love podcasts, and some of you may also love podcasts now because, or have already, because of, you know, our pandemic situation. And so I might just put podcast as one of my ideas. Like I'm going to do a podcast about something, or I'm going to do podcasts with my students.
Don't get in your head and don't think about that you can't do it. Just write down those ideas.
Yeah.
I'll give you a second.
And for me, like with the culture jamming project, that all started from just like, I wanted to do something around social justice. So you could just write that down as well.
I keep muting myself. Where are we? Are we good to move forward? Give us your thumbs up, down. Look good, Max?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, let's give like 15 more seconds of silence and just get down whatever you can.
Okay, so you should now have a lot on your paper. It probably looks a little messy, but probably tons of really great ideas and lots of information about yourself and maybe some things that you've learned. So we just want to give you a chance to reflect, to go through your identity map and everything that you've written down and select 2 or 3 pieces you'd like to share with your team. Now, it doesn't necessarily need to be a project idea or a specific identity, but with a couple things that really stood out to you that you feel like you would like to share and discuss with your team. So I'm going to just give you about 30 seconds to look at that and see what really hit home with you. Okay, so we're going to be putting you all in groups in just a second, and we're going to be doing this Save the Last Word protocol. So we're going to ask you to go through this process with your team, looking at the things that you've written down today. So I'm going to go through these, read these out to you. Of course, they're right here. So first, you're going to select a team member who will be your timer. It's going to be essential that you have a timer. Ruben, you sent that to everybody for them to take a look at while they're with their groups. Is that what you just shared?
Yeah, I just put into the chat the slide so that once we get into breakout rooms, they won't be able to see this
Perfect.
screen, but
Okay.
somebody in the group maybe is going to pull this up and make sure that everybody's following along the protocol.
Okay,
you can
great.
also take a screenshot or take a picture with your phone.
Mm-hmm.
Good
So
idea.
make sure you decide. Oops. Yes. So decide on the order that your team will go in and share. The first one will have 1 minute to share a highlight or an aha that they had from their identity map. So what you wanted to share. And then each member will have 15 seconds to respond with an appreciation or a connection. So it can be like, I really connected with you here, or I really understand how you felt there, or I really appreciate how you think about things like this. And then the team member who was originally shared will have 30 seconds to respond to the whole team. And then you're going to repeat that process 3, 4, and 5 until all members have gone. And we're going to bring you all back here together in about 20 minutes. So go ahead and grab, this link from the chat, or take a picture or screenshot or whatever you got to do. And then Ruben will be dispersing you all.
Yeah.
Looks like we have pretty much everybody back.
Yep, we're at 80 participants right now. So it
Nice.
might be a few
So as
more
you all,
it might be a few more
as
seconds.
you all, as you all are rolling in, if there was something that really came up that was great for your group, interesting, again, an aha, something you'd like to share, can you go ahead and throw that in the chat so we can all see, what you all got from this experience? So as you all can see, as you're coming in, we have you all putting in the chat what you got from that experience, from mapping your identity, yourself, your passions, and then bringing it to the team. Because as we're moving forward, what we're really doing is we're mapping our assets with ourselves and with our team. And Ruben will be going over this with you in a little bit, but just to know that we're all part of this bigger picture. So Ruben, can you put us to the next slide?
Yes.
And really, you are an asset. You are valuable to your team. Your identity, your experiences, your passions, they're essential for you all to come together and to come together for your students. And you knowing who you are and those identities are so important for your students as well, as you're connecting with them. And they see how you're bringing yourself to the table, and then that'll help them bring themselves to the table. Max, did you want to add anything to this one?
Yeah, I'd love to. I think at the end of the day, for me, what I hope that one of the things that you take away from this, whether it felt a little forced or it felt very natural, is that you got an understanding of how important it is to flesh out what it is you care about in order to decide what you want to teach. Because the more you're tapping into something that you care about, that's part of your identity, the more you're going to be excited to do it. And that's the same for our students. That is why it's so important for us to consider doing things like this. You can do this exact activity or something slightly modified with your students to figure out, who are they and how well do they know who they are, and what do they care about? And then using your project-based learning, your project that you're doing, to tap into those passions and those identities, cultures of your students, because that's the only way you're really going to get them engaged. And that's the only way you're really going to get them to learn. And that's the whole point of all this anyway. So.
And I'm saying that, you know, this is bringing up excitement and like reconnection and allowing you to truly, truly want to do this work and get excited about it. And that's what we want for our kids, right? So we hope that you enjoyed this experience and like learning about yourselves and bringing it into the work that you do, which will go into, again, like I said, the bigger picture that Ruben will be going over with you all in terms of your community asset mapping. So thank you for your time and working with us today, and it was great meeting you all.
Thank you,
Yes.
Max and Cydia. I don't know if you're hanging out or not, but if you are hanging out, maybe people have questions in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah, Cydia, can you also put the slide deck again in the chat? Several people are asking for that.
For sure. I'll add that right now.
And also I'll pop our emails in there in case anybody wants to reach out to us. I know I saw somebody say, like, I'm curious how to do this more often with students because we're old. They said we old. And so, you know, you can always reach out to us. We have lots and lots of things to provide for resources.
Yep, that's what we do.
Okay, we're going to head into, so we're going to transition a little bit from you and thinking about yourself, your identity, how you're an asset, and we're going to transition that into looking at assets that you all have in your team, number one. Then we're going to look at our school community and kind of reaching out from there. What about walking distance within from the campus? And then the local community. So we're going to move into like the true, like more broad asset mapping, community asset mapping at this point. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be in this segment, we're going to be doing a lot of brainstorming. And the thing that we want you to keep in mind is what you do with this asset mapping this morning is just the starting place. So you already have existing assets that your team knows about. Like, you know, we're doing this project and we're connected with these people, but there might be more out there. And that's what we want you to think about, is not just for this project, but even future projects, or maybe something you're doing just in your curriculum yourself in your classroom. But what are the assets you have access to that you haven't really even thought about, or again, your existing ones that you need to list out because you haven't done that in the past. It's almost like it's institutional knowledge, but what if one of you leaves? Do we still have access to that asset? Or so those are things we want you to think about. And this is an ongoing process, something that we want you to revisit throughout the year, or as something pops up in your mind, adding it to this asset map in a month from now, or maybe throughout the year as you sit down and meet. So I'm going to jump to the next slide here. This is the kind of just a screenshot of what it's going to look like. And this is just a segment of it, but team, school, within walking distance, local community, and really thinking about how is this, whatever you're listing, how is it an asset? And then how can you integrate the asset into whatever you're doing within your work? In this case, we're specifically focusing on PBL and projects. Okay, so what we're going to do when we bounce out, and I'm going to pull up the actual document in a minute. When we bounce out, we're going to have one team member, and we're going to put you off into your breakout rooms in just a moment again, and hopefully it'll work better this time for a few of you. So one member will make a copy, so agree who's going to do that, and then share that with the rest of the team members. You're going to identify a timekeeper, and then you're going to take each category. So for example, team, school, within walking distance, and you'll spend 2 minutes per category just brainstorming and documenting your assets. And then we'll bring you back in about 12 minutes or so. So this probably won't take as long as we have with the other activities this morning, but this is just an initial brainstorming to really get us thinking as we move into project development today. All right, I'm going to pull up, I'm going to exit out of this one. I'm going to pull up the actual document so you can see what it looks like. So in this case, we have, again, a listed area. We're going to start with team, 2 minutes, school, 2 minutes, walking distance, 2 minutes, and then we're going to end at local community. Okay, and below at the bottom down here, we also have beyond the local community and virtual. you can start listing these things out, but this is more for you to go back as a team and continue to build this asset bank or asset map that you have access to. And the last thing down here is a final reflection that we want you to think about. How might this process of considering identity and community assets impact your thinking and project design? And then what is the next step you're thinking about after having created this asset map and thinking about your individual, your team, school, so on and so forth, assets? The hope is that you have a great bank of assets listed for just your team, just talking about who on your team is bringing what assets. And hopefully you identified maybe from your earlier discussion, hey, so, you know, I hadn't thought about this before, but and you never said that about this, but I think you have this asset and you've added that to the team asset map. And then thinking about your school and within walking distance, and really just thinking about what can you tap into in these various communities that might possibly be a starting place for your projects, but it could also be something where you're already rolling with a project or a project idea, and now you've seen this hidden asset that you can now tap into. The big thing is that you can continue to maintain this asset bank, and again, you might be in 2 weeks from now, maybe you're doing something and something pops into your head, add it to the asset map. So that was the intention of this morning, is to really just get you thinking about where you can go. The other part is, and Max and Cydia mentioned this, was just the idea of starting with your students and thinking about their identity and doing their own asset mapping and thinking about, in this class community, what are the assets that all of these students are bringing into the class, and letting everybody else in the class be aware of the assets that, you know, are being harnessed just within that group. We as teachers, you know, we're an asset, of course, but who else is bringing the assets into this classroom, the skills, the talents, the knowledge that's already in the classroom. So we hope that this really helped you guys start thinking about possibly incorporating some of these assets into a project, or it might be a starting place for some project ideas. We're gonna head off at this point. So we want to thank you.
Want to move us to the next slide?
Go ahead.
Go move us to the next slide.
Yep. Oops. Oh, there we go. Thanks, Cydia. We want to thank all of you this morning for just joining us. And if you would type in the chat, so, you know, just at least one aha you had while engaging in the process of the identity or the community asset mapping with your team. And then take a moment just to read through some of the others, scroll up and down and see what's in there. We are going to take the chat and post it so that people can access that, and we can too, and pulling out some great ideas or quotes and things like that. So I'm gonna stop talking there and just say thank you again for everyone. Just, you know, Max, Cydia, Lance, and I, we've been talking about this, and hopefully this was beneficial to the start of your PBL Institute.